Welcome to Geezers of Gear, episode number 243. Are you planning an event in New Orleans? Look to RZI Lighting for all of your lighting needs. Since 1999, they have been delivering top-notch lighting solutions with a friendly touch. Choose RZI for rentals, sales, and labor to ensure a successful production. Their production staff are there to support you every step of the way, making your event run smoothly. Trust RZI Lighting, your go-to source for the best brands and equipment, including rigging, staging, automated lighting, and special effects. With their on-site repair services and extensive inventory, they've been committed to providing top-notch event production solutions since 1999. And this episode is also brought to you by AVL. AVL Media Group is one of the leading distributors of professional audio, video, and lighting equipment in North America. Initially established in 1996 by founder and CEO Stephen Costers, after seeing an opportunity to inject a sense of genuine passion into the distribution process. The company has grown to be the proud home of many key brands in the industry, including Midas, Tannoy, Labgruppen, Lake, Clark Technique, TurboSound, Spotlight, Zero Ohm Systems, and more. For Stephen Costers, AVL was the natural culmination of a life in the rock and roll business, driven by the love of music, matched with a genuine desire to creatively explore all the elements that make live events possible. Visit avlmediagroup.com today. Well, of course, I've been talking all about this new system that we're using with Riverside, and so a couple of things have happened. One is that we've gone to sort of a hybrid, so you're seeing the intro and promos from our old system, so now we're paying for two systems, basically, is what it comes down to. We love the framing and the way that this all works with our old system, and the ability to show off the sponsor logos and stuff like that. And so it just works. We like this format, but we don't like the actual system and their tech structure behind it. So unfortunately, right now, we're paying for two full systems. And so Riverside, our new system, is great. However, there are some little glitchy, weird things that we're learning with it. And one happened with Steve Warren last week. And so what would normally take about 15 minutes to edit an episode, we don't spend a lot of time on editing unless it's something that, you know, the guest is like, hey, I don't want that part in there about my grandma. Could you please take it out? And I don't mean grandma lighting console. I mean your grandmother. Or, you know, just something that was said and needed to be changed, or something wrong, or that somebody wanted me to go back and edit and take out or whatever. But typically, we don't do a lot of editing. And so, long story short, what should have taken me 15 or 20 minutes to edit the Steve Warren episode took probably about 15 hours. And literally, I mean, I was working on it all weekend, last weekend, just to get the podcast done. But it's there. Hopefully you've heard it. The Steve Warren episode, which I believe is 242, is excellent. And if you haven't heard it, please go listen to it because it's good. What else? F1 last weekend. I was very grateful to get an invite from Roby, from my friend Craig Burrows at Roby. I guess he had a lighting designer group that he took to the races, and somebody had to jump out at the last minute, and I happened to be local, and I got the call. So, of course, I said yes, and they had great seats, just a really cool group of people, really nice. Never watched a race in air conditioning before other than at home. And so that was kind of cool. And, you know, honestly, Craig is very knowledgeable about racing, and so were some of the lighting designers that were there as well. And so it was really cool. It was a lot of fun to do. And then, again, I was super grateful that on Sunday, the race day, because I went for the qualifying day and the sprint race. And I won't talk about why we were late for the sprint race, Peter Moore. And so anyways, on Sunday, that ticket was available again. And Craig said, would Jeremy want to go? And those of you who have heard this podcast before know that my son's a racing driver. And so he was super excited and happy to be able to be there for the race on Sunday. And so, yeah, thank you to Roby. Thank you to Craig Burrows, my good friend, for the invite and for the hospitality and for introducing me to some lighting designers who I didn't even know, some really great people. And so what else do I have? I've got Sarah told me to remind people that we're doing a bit of a guest outreach now too. So if you or someone you know should be a guest on Geezers of Gear, please shoot an email to producer@geezersofgear.com. That goes to Sarah, and she'll do a little research on the guest or on you. And you know, again, our criteria really is, are you interesting? And will it be an interesting conversation? Because we're super sensitive to our listeners and, you know, the people, the viewers, the people who are our audience, basically. We're very sensitive to the fact that we're putting out a product that they will like and that is good quality. And so, yeah, she'll just want to make sure that it's going to be an interesting podcast. And then we'll get you signed up and in the loop of scheduling. We're generally scheduling about a month out right now. Sometimes we get last minute openings where, because we're recording 2 a week, sometimes one of those will have to reschedule. That just happened this week, actually. So we're only doing one this week. And so, yeah, we'd love to get more new, interesting guests on, people that, you know, maybe I don't know with my 30 plus years in the industry, and Sarah doesn't know. So if you or if you know someone would like to sign up as a guest, please do. Again, just shoot an email to producer@geezersofgear.com. And also, if you could, and I'm asking another favor here, please subscribe to whatever podcast platform you listen to us on. So if that's Apple, just click the little subscribe button. If it's YouTube, subscribe. Spotify, any of the ones that you are listening to our podcast on, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe. That does a lot of really good things for us that I won't go into explaining, but it just helps give us access to a wider audience, a bigger audience. And the larger our audience, the better our sponsors, or the more that our sponsors are willing to support the podcast. And then the more we can really do. And we have a lot of really fun plans that I'm going to start letting you in on at some point here. Not today, but someday. And then, of course, my favorite weekly topic that I like to jump into and that I've gotten a lot of feedback on, some good, some not so good. I got ripped up on, I think it was YouTube, or I don't remember which platform it was, but somebody attacking me for my self-driving car comments. And it's a technology I firmly believe in. I don't think it's going to be very long before Uber has no drivers, before, you know, cars are driving us around with nobody in them other than us. And to be honest, I look forward to it. I love driving, but I also love working and talking on my phone and not having to pay attention to where I'm going. And I also don't love accidents. And so if driverless cars will help us get over the problem with human intervention or human mistakes, then I think it's a really good thing. And you don't have to worry every time your kid goes on a long journey or your kid goes out to see a concert at night or something that you might not see them come back. And without getting super dramatic there, you know, I just think it's obvious to me at this point that driverless cars are the future. And I still think there will be a place for, you know, those of us who are wanting to, you know, be sentimental or be attached to our past or whatever, to go to a place and drive a regular car, not just a racetrack, but just areas where you can drive regular cars. I just don't think it's going to be in the inner cities for much longer. So every week I look for some cool things to talk about on AI. And so one of the ones, and I was actually just talking with Michael Steigner from Highlight Productions. is a big photographer, and I was talking to him recently, or this morning, I think, on social media about Adobe Firefly. And so there's a lot of uproar with Adobe right now and with photographers, because Adobe has this campaign that says skip the photo shoot. And I think it was probably not very well thought through, if you ask me, because it's like in our industry saying skip the programmer, or skip the programming session, skip the production rehearsals, or whatever it is, right? Like just skip a very big part of a live event. And so obviously for a photographer, the photo shoot is kind of the thing, right? And so what they're basically offering is these AI generated backgrounds, and saying you don't need to go out and shoot those backgrounds. We can just provide them for you using just an AI background generator. Sounds great, but in reality, it's taking food off their plate. And I don't know that it's the direction I would have gone right out of the gate, but Adobe's a very big company and they're probably smarter than me, so what do I know? But it has creators very pissed off right now. And I've looked at a lot of comments on some of their posts of this campaign. Not good. I was messing around at 6 o'clock this morning for some reason with a couple of music creation apps, or they're very new. They're like in beta, but one was called Suno and one was called Udio. And these allow you to basically go in and, like when you're prompting ChatGPT saying, you know, behave like you're a lawyer and write something to me so I can understand it. And I'm a seventh grader, which is probably giving myself too much credit. And, but with them, you can go in and just say, create a song about quitting smoking, and it'll create a song about quitting smoking. You can tell it what genre you want it to be. You can put in as much detail or as little detail as you want. The result is unbelievable. And if you go through, if you look at these two websites, Suno and Udio, they're a little bit different. One's a little more creative and one's a little more accurate, I would say. But both of them had samples on their songs that they were promoting, that from some people who went on and created them, I guess, that I couldn't tell they were AI generated. I mean, killer vocals. There was a rendition of House of the Rising Sun on one of them. Blew me away. Like, I would buy the song if it was on iTunes. You know what I mean? So crazy. And remember how early we are. Like, remember a year ago, we weren't even talking about ChatGPT. And right now, we're already in a place where you can put in a fairly, you know, generic topic and it'll give you a song around it. Or you can get really specific. Like, there was one about a guy, I can't remember what his name was. Like, let's say his name was Bob, and his friends wanted to basically, you know, mess with him. And so they went on and created a song about Bob shitting his pants at work. And I mean, it's hilarious. And it's sort of like a big band kind of song almost, you know, and or like jazz, but from the 60s, you know. Really great song, but it's all about Bob shitting his pants at work and embarrassing himself with his coworkers and stuff. And that as a woman, I support Bob and he's a great guy, but he shits his pants at work and that's not cool. And so I don't know if you can find it. I should have shared it, but I don't really even remember which one I got it from. But it was one of those, Suno or Udio. And another one that's interesting is search engines. I'm paying a lot of attention to this. I spend a bunch of money with Google and these other ones through my business. And AI-driven search engines are coming very quickly. So OpenAI has one coming, which is ChatGPT, basically, very fast, that they think will go head-to-head with Google. And I've been playing with one called Perplexity. And it's cool. I wouldn't say that it replaces Google, in that if you just want to know, you know, something really simple like connect me to this website or whatever, it gives you too much information back. It doesn't give you back like just the web domain or just the phone number for American Airlines, if that's what you're looking for, or whatever it is, right? But if you want some more information, or you want nuance, or you want facts, or you want something surrounding the topic that you've just searched for, it's so good. It's incredible. Really, really great. And so, yeah, check out Perplexity. Again, OpenAI has one coming as well. I've been messing with this brainstorming AI, which my girlfriend said, oh yeah, that's just to replace your girlfriend. That's all that's going to do. And so basically what it is it's someone to talk to about anything, whether it's what should I have for dinner tonight, or I've got this really complex problem in my business, or it's, my leg hurts when I run, but only when I'm turning left, not when I'm turning right, or whatever it is. Or it could just be, I'm really struggling with these things in my life or with this thing at work or whatever. So it's part-time girlfriend, part-time therapist, part-time business advisor, part-time whatever. It's a lot of things. And so it's learning and remembering. So the more you talk to it, basically, the more that it knows you and knows your idiosyncrasies or your habits or your ideas or your idealisms or your beliefs or whatever. And, it'll call you out. It'll say, last Thursday you said, and I'm not saying it's amazing. I'm saying it's pretty cool, though. It's pretty cool. I've used it a few times. You have to do this initial thing where it's asking you a lot of what do you like? What do you not like? How old are you? When's your birthday? What kind of food do you like? Blah, blah, blah. And there is a huge level of security built into it. So they're not selling your data to anyone. And that's obviously important because it's going to know as much about you as your girlfriend does or your wife or your husband. So the one that I'm using is called Kin. Kin. And again, it's in beta. I don't think you can just go download it. I think you have to sign up for some beta program or something, but I've got it. And it's less scary than you think. It is very helpful for a lot of things. It's a little more personal. That's how I would say it probably, because I've used ChatGPT a whole bunch. This is more personal, and this is more based on the learnings that you've put into it. So it gets to know you like a very close friend or a very close advisor or a very close mentor would. And really cool. And sort of a last one that I would talk about, well, two more. ChatGPT, OpenAI, the parent company of ChatGPT, has created an AI-generated image detector, which is interesting. It's sort of like a drug dealer building a police force within itself, So, and it works really well. I looked at some tests on it and stuff, and it picks up, and it'll tell you which program created it too, for the most part. So that's interesting. I think that's going to become a big deal where Google is going to steer people away from AI-generated images or AI-generated content. I know they already do. If you're writing blogs using AI generators, for example, and you're using those blogs to try and improve your SEO, your search engine optimization, you are going to fail. It's going to penalize you for using AI-generated content. So interesting. And then lastly, finally, is an app I found called Gamma, which is pretty incredible. I mean, you can basically say, I want to create a slide presentation about Geezers of Gear that I'm going to present to potential sponsors. And you give it very little information, boom, it spits out this unbelievable looking slide presentation, which, by the way, could also be a website, could also be a document. And so we are at that stage now where you can create relatively simple websites within about 2 minutes. And they look beautiful, and the AI system will publish that website for you. You don't even have to go publish the website. You just give it the custom domain, and you probably have to put in some hosting details and stuff, and it publishes the site for you. So if you or your children are part-time web developers doing really simple, like those WordPress sites that you charge $1,000 or $2,000 for, and it takes you an hour or 2 hours to build, because they're all templated and you're just putting in a little bit of information, I think those are going by the wayside very quickly. This, to me, is better than any of the $1,000 or $2,000 WordPress sites that I saw. So there you have it. That is my AI update for the week. And do me a favor, send me messages, content, comments on the podcast or on YouTube. Let me know if you think this AI discussion is valuable, or if you just skip by it every week. And I know the few of you I can think of right away that would be skipping right by it, but I'm sure some people do listen to it. It's important. It's going to impact all of our futures, and so yeah, I try to share what I can. Anyways, today's guest, Jim Woodward, is an award-winning designer whose expertise is 3D visualization, rendering, and modeling for a wide variety of industries, including concert and theatrical films, events. I blew that one. Events, film, television, corporate events, trade shows, museums, architectural firms, and retail. Jim has been incorporating CAD and 3D visualization into the entertainment workflow since 1986. He's produced corporate and concert events for widely recognized companies and entertainment artists for over 40 years. Now Jim is the Senior Entertainment Product Specialist at Vectorworks, focused on providing training and support for lighting design, production design, previs, rendering, and more. Welcome, Jim. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing great. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I'm a little bit headphone envious. I got some headphone envy. You got big, bright red Beats on, and I got these goofy-looking AKG headphones on, but you look snappy.
They match your red mic cord there. So
see, that's what I'm saying.
We're in sync. We're in sync.
You almost should send me those just because of that. Just because of the red mic cord. You know what? It's funny. I saw a podcast, and I can't even remember what it was now, but I went, man, that red mic cord looks good, and I had to go on Amazon instantly and order one. So I ordered a red mic cord, and now I need red headphones though, because it's just not good enough with these black ones anymore. See,
we all tend to have a little too much black in our images.
It's a show thing, huh? It's
yeah.
Your show blacks. I've never been a roadie, call it, but I've just always loved black clothes from when I was, a little kid. I loved black clothes, so I don't know.
I got it all the way back to when I started. My mom was asking, why do you always wear black? Right to yesterday when we were on vacation, my wife said, why do you always wear black? And I said, it's comfortable for me.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, me too. It's just when I go to the closet, like, first of all, 90% of my closet is black anyways. But, I'm just not typically going to grab a yellow shirt or a red shirt or something. It's like every year on St. Patrick's Day, I'm looking for a green shirt. Nope, still don't have one, So, yeah, I mean, it's just a thing. Black cars, too, for me. I prefer black cars over any other color, and happen to have one right now.
That's my exception. I don't like to be in a very warm car when I get in, so.
Is that real, though? Like, I know it's supposed to be, but
I'm not sure, but it's always been my choice.
Yeah, I live in South Florida, and I have a black car, and I've had a couple white ones, I've had a couple red ones, etc. But like for me, I don't know that I've ever felt hotter in one color than another, and so I don't know. I'm sure it's
got to
true.
be false. Every time I go to Las Vegas or Florida, everybody has black cars. So
it's true, huh? It's true.
It's fashionable.
The one thing is they do get dirty quicker, and like I'll take mine to the car wash, and literally an hour later, I'm like, what? Did I get splashed or something? What's going on? Why is it dirty already? And white, you can keep it for 2 weeks after a car wash, and it still looks good. So I don't know why I pick black cars all the time. Silly. So tell me, I know you've been in the business a while, and I think it's coming on 50 years, right? And you don't.
Yes.
You look like you're in. You look like you're in your 50s to me. So that's.
Thank you.
It's a bit surprising. So how did you get started? That was I guess the mid 70s, right?
Yes, it was I believe 1974. My sister took me to an Elton John concert. And at the old Boston Garden, you had to walk out into the balcony. You had to go up a little flight of stairs, and you came out in the middle of the balcony. And then you either went up or down to go to your seat.
Yeah.
And as I walked up that first flight of steps, I didn't see anything of the show. I saw what was above. I saw the
Ah,
truss, I saw the audio hanging, and I looked up there. And before I even saw the show, I said, "That is the coolest thing I ever saw." And
wow.
a year later, I was schlepping steel par cans anywhere I could. I started out in punk rock at a place in Boston called the Ratskeller, short of the Rat. And it was
Huh.
Boston's answer to CBGB's. A lot of the acts coming over from the US for showcase gigs at CBGB's didn't want to do that on their first night. So they usually stopped in Boston to do their first US show. Believe some of those acts would have been the Police, the Cars, were a local Boston band, and
Cars
all
are from
kinds of
Boston? I didn't know that.
yes, yeah,
Oh, that's
and they,
cool.
all kinds of stories to go back to the punk rock days. But basically, I started going in there any time I could. I was sneaking in there. I think 15. And I think I can say it now. All the owners are long gone; they can't be
Yeah.
sued. But I
Yeah.
was sneaking in at 15, and by the time the doors opened, the people around there, the bartenders and the bouncers, saw me around. They assumed I was 18, so they didn't kick me out. And I just started doing anything I could to help bands and started running the lights there. I think the owner asked me for $60 a night if I would leave my 6 steel par cans in there and come in every night and run them. And I do believe he offered me free beer as part of the deal. And I said, I think I found a new career.
There you
But I
go.
was always interested in the work part of it. And a few years later, a very patient gentleman, J.T. McDonald, doing an Aerosmith rehearsal up in Boston when they were going out on a tour. I had shown a little incentive and walked up to him and said, "Well, can I help you?" And he said, "Well, you know how to run a lighting console." And at that point, I had made my first console, which goes back to the punk rock days for just a second. I didn't have a dimmer board, and one of my greatest pieces of gear I ever found in my life was a dimmer board because my first console was toggle switches and duplex outlets,
Yeah. Mine
flash and
too.
trash.
Yeah.
It's only 6 bar cans, and it was punk rock. So if you can make a show out of that, I believe you can make a show out of just about any moving light fixture out there.
So you know what, Jim? Funny. So I started in my first band when I was, I think, 12 as a singer, and we built, and I think I did it with my dad in my garage, a like a wooden box with 6 light switches on it,
Yeah,
just little light
that's it.
switches and plugs on the back of it. And we didn't even have par cans. We had like floodlights from, the 50-year ago equivalent of Home Depot. And, they were just literally like, par lamps or flood
Yeah.
lamps. And that was my first lighting system. So,
Some people got it. One more story on those to put a coffee can around them.
right. Yeah.
It would we turned them into a little par can.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was the first thing I found. And once you can control something off a dimmer, a whole lot of creative thoughts came out.
Right. Yeah.
And so I had been in the right place at the right time. I saw a lighting plot on one of the road cases at the rehearsal when we were setting up, and I was just a general hand. And I looked at it, and when I went out to the console, I said, "Wow!" And looked at the plot, and the guy that just climbed up, he was sending me out there for focus to run the board. And I looked at the plot, and I brought up the first channel that he needed without him asking. And he
Yeah.
said, "Oh, how'd you know which one we needed?" I said, "I looked at the plot." And he goes, "Oh, pretty good."
Nice.
And a couple of days later, after the rehearsal loaded out, the third guy on the tour couldn't do it. He called me and said, "How'd you like to do a tour?" And I went down to New York, and literally with my feet still sticking on the floor from the bar floor at
Yeah.
the
At
club,
the Rat. Yeah.
I jumped right over and found myself on a very nice tour. There was a couple of gigs in between, but that was my first real break. I went on a couple of small things before that. The Jay Giles band went out with a local band as opening act, as I think a backline tech. And
But what
I
was
think
that period of time, Jim? Like, from the time you were hanging out in the Rat to when you got to actually start working on lighting to when you got that gig on a tour. What are we
about four
talking?
years. And a
Oh,
lot of
wow.
gigs in between, a lot of local stuff, a lot
Yeah.
of switching around different clubs. I moved on to another club, just bounced around for about 4 years. Anything and anything I could do, work for a couple of local lighting and sound companies. But once I found myself on that first large tour, the very first tour, like I said, was just as an opening act. But the after our show, the opening act left, it was replaced by U2 on the Jay Giles
Oh,
Band in
wow.
1982, I think it was.
Wow.
And it was the Freeze Frame tour, and they didn't really have a place for them as they came over on their first tour, and they ended up on that. And I learned the strong lesson of never underestimate the opening act, because I know a few of the Lidditz audio company. I won't put it in by name, but everybody knows who they are. I
Yeah.
saw a couple of people help out the opening act, and they didn't have enough cash for the to pay the standard $50 or $60 to run the opening act thing, and they were nice enough to say, well, we don't have it, could you help us out? And they said sure. And I believe that was the story of a few of the guys that, don't forget us if you ever get big. And they remembered
Yeah.
those guys, and I believe that was where some of the guys that they first got on that tour. And it
So,
was a big lesson to learn of never underestimate the
yeah, but
opening act.
that's an interesting story that you tell. So, are you saying that the opening act would have to, was it a VIG that they had to pay the audio guy, or was
General
it,
courtesy. Yeah, it was your
yeah.
hour off. So if it was lighting, front of house audio, or monitors, it was just kind of a general thing. Hey, if we don't have our own person, could you run the board for the
Oh,
opening
I
act?
see. So it's not to use the sound system because that's part of the
No,
deal, right? So
no.
they get to use the sound system, but they need their own audio guy, and if they don't have their own guy, they just go to the front of house engineer and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
here's $50. Can you do our show for us too?"
It wasn't mandatory, but it was the general,
Yeah,
kind of like, hey, it's
I
my
get it.
hour off.
Right.
And everybody, but a lot of people said, hey, they don't have it. Can you help us out? And that's the great
Yeah.
thing about it, is that you never know who's going to be your next artist
Yeah.
to work
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. You two. Wow. So you two opened for Jay Giles.
Yes, a
That's
very small
wild.
part. I think we weren't on those shows because we were the opening act before that, but I believe it was for about 2/3 of the tour. And Jay Giles was on the top of the charts, and at 2 years later, I believe Jay Giles kind of called it, put it on hiatus for a little bit,
Yeah.
and U2 was going out to the stadium, so it was a
Yeah.
quick turnaround.
That's wild. Yeah, that's a cool story. Yeah, so that was your first tour then. The Jay Giles thing was your first real
Yeah,
tour. First
real
real.
first. There was a couple little regional, venturing out a little bit with some local acts, but that was the first one where I actually got on a bus and started doing it.
And what was your role? You were a lighting tech or
On the very first one, I was backline. I
okay.
actually did some backline work on that,
So
and then
what was that like? How old were you then? Probably in your early 20s, I'm guessing.
yes, 21ish,
Yeah,
somewhere around there. And I
probably
believe my first luggage was a milk crate.
oh my god. That's wild.
I had to run out to the store and buy a duffel bag,
Yeah.
because I left home with literally a milk crate and my clothes in it.
Yeah, that's like my son. Like I'll get on a flight with my son and he'll walk on carrying like a Publix grocery store shopping bag and I'm like, "Why are you bringing food?" And he goes, "No, this is my clothes." I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing?" Like I bought him a really nice suitcase and
Yes.
cuz he travels a lot, but if it's just a couple like a pair of pants and a couple pairs of underwear and a couple t-shirts, he just brings a Publix bag. It's pretty funny.
I've learned to
Kids,
travel light, but not. I still couldn't
not
get it
quite
into a
that.
milk
Yeah.
crate.
Yeah, that's funny. But I mean, was it weird being away from home for that long and away from your friends? And like, do you remember that being an issue, or were your eyes this big, going, "I get to see the
No,
world"?
yeah, didn't know. I had no issues of doing that. I met my wife of 49 years. Well, she doesn't want me to say that, but
Yeah,
we've been together probably about a year after I think I started it, and we've been together ever since. So my determination was to make a good living and send it home and buy a house, pay off the mortgage, and eventually come back home and enjoy that. But I
yeah,
stayed on the road a little longer than I thought I was going to.
yeah, yeah. Well, and stop in and see her every once in a while, hopefully. But
Yeah.
You met her on the road? You met her while you were
No,
touring? Oh,
no, met her
oh, you
when we
met her
were
at home.
kids. Yeah, met
Oh,
her.
that's cool.
Met her
So she's
at
not
my
from the
hometown.
business or anything.
No, I dragged her into it though.
Oh, you did? Which probably looked really good until you got to COVID. And then it was like,
Yeah,
we're all dying. We're all broke now.
yeah. I
Yeah.
was very grateful that I was very lucky to have gotten a job with my current employer, Vectorworks,
Yeah.
right before COVID.
Oh,
So I didn't
oh,
have to worry about when the industry kind of shut down, and I know a lot of people were not in a good position at that, and
yeah.
our hearts go out to anybody that didn't have work. I was one of the very fortunate ones that everybody was learning our product, so
Well, and
stayed busy.
I know quite a few marriages that where they're both in the industry, and those were the ones that I really felt for, where
Yeah,
they were both like one was a production manager and the other was a seamstress or a whatever, and I mean they were both suddenly completely out of work for 18 months or whatever. I really felt for those people, and I was doing a weekly podcast or not a podcast but a Zoom call that we just called, the weekly happy hour or something. It was every Wednesday at 5 o'clock, and it was for the live events industry. And we'd have 50 people one week, 100 the next week, 40 the next week, but it was sort of a who's who and lots of new friends too, like lots of people that I
yeah.
didn't know before that were caterers or truck drivers or whatever, and anyone was invited. It was a drop in basically, and just some of the stories were just so sad, not of death and sickness, but I'm talking about just the financial ruin and how that impacted families and households and stuff. It was tough, really,
And
really tough.
relationships as well. There was
Yeah.
a nice talk at the Advanced Safety Alliance the year before last, and they had a gentleman that came in and was a registered healthcare worker and spoke about how all of a sudden everybody in our industry was now 12 months together in a two-bedroom apartment in New York with
Yeah.
700 square feet, and their lives were, okay, I'm gone 6 months, now I'm gone 3 months, and never being in the same place more than a couple of months. I was lucky that we had, basement that I'm going to move down here and I'm going to have
Yeah.
my own little office. So
Yeah.
I had a nice situation, but a lot of people didn't. And I didn't realize until that gentleman spoke about that,
Yeah.
that it was an industry-wide issue of a lot of relationships not quite making it through.
Well, remember, like a lot of people, I talk to so many people all the time in our industry, and so many people hadn't seen their wife for 6 months all at once. Like they'd never been together for 6 months all at once, let
Yeah,
alone 18
exactly.
months or whatever. But I remember a lot of those conversations. Like the longest I've ever been in the same place as my wife was a couple of months,
Yeah.
and now here I am going on the second year. And yeah, there's been some tense moments where it's like, when are you going to leave?
I
Uh,
think it's so much easier now, though, for people on the road. And I'm not saying, that, we walk through 5 feet of snow to get to school every day kind of story, but we didn't talk to anybody for a week to our loved ones, for a week at a time
yeah.
because it was limited to a hotel. And half the time, to save a little bit of money, you'd get down to the lobby and use the payphone. And you wouldn't talk to people for 3, 4 days. There was time when my wife didn't know where I was for
Yeah.
a couple of weeks at a time, other than looking at the itinerary, but she didn't have any real way to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
And there was some tours didn't even have production phones. So
Yeah.
literally you had to do, teching on a phone, trying to fix a console at 725
Yeah.
over a payphone in the lobby of an arena. And that was just the
Isn't that
nature of
crazy
it,
to remember that
communication.
stuff? That's just
One of
nuts to remember that stuff.
one of the smartest people was if someone got a cordless phone and put it in a hamper in one of the dressing rooms and was able to plug it into one of the Watts lines for the broadcast. And we
Oh,
finally had a cordless phone on the bus. That was
that's
first.
awesome.
That was the first of the wireless communication on the bus.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, but it's wild to think about stuff like that. Like I've never thought of that trying to do a service call to fix, anything, a light fixture or a dimming rack or whatever it is, but you got to go to the you got to go to the
Got to
payphone
go. Oh yeah.
in the venue. I mean,
At
that's just crazy.
725.
That's insane.
console's down at 725, and you've literally got to call, someone to help you through it.
Yeah.
And some tours just did not want to pay for the production phones.
But you know what? You're right though, because like we say at our age, kids these days, but they it is easier. You can do 2 hour FaceTimes every night with your kids and your wife and stuff, right? Like it's much easier now that we have FaceTime and Zoom and all of these great tools where we can be more together. And it's still not the same as being in the same room, but it's a hell of a lot closer than a payphone in the lobby, or being in the production office where the production manager is like, okay, you got 2 minutes. That's it. 2 minutes. And then I want you out of here. And you're trying to tell your wife you love her, and you got the production manager sitting next to you going, hey, it's a minute and a half right now. Make
Yeah,
it quick.
yeah,
Speed it up.
exactly.
you know. So yeah, that's pretty wild. So how did your career evolve then? Because you started in backline, and how'd you end up spending so many great years in lighting? Like, how'd you take that next step?
Well, I thought I was going to get into audio, to tell you the truth, but the first time I ever got my hands on a real console, I was not good at it. I did
Yeah.
not have the ear, and I was literally tearing up drivers, because I didn't know how to control it.
Huh.
And I was a drummer, so I just all wanted to just hear drums, drums, drums. So I didn't make a good audio person, and I just kind of fell into lighting and into the visual end of it, and I really enjoyed that part of it, and never really looked back. Later on, I got more, a little more into the production end of it. But for the most part, I just really loved painting that picture in my mind. And long before we had, visualization software and all the virtual world, I remember what I wanted to see in my head when I was listening to a song, and I would just evolve this little lighting beam picture. And it was just all really about beams back then. There was no aerial effects. If we had a little bit of, we never needed a hazer because most of the places we were working in, smoking was still allowed. So there was abundance of atmosphere,
Yeah.
which really made the show look good. I'll tell you that. I know it's
Yeah.
not politically correct to smoke in venues, but it was one of those times when the air just had a saturation that everything looked good everywhere. But it was one of those ones where I never looked at the equipment as being my deciding factor in a design. It was really about what's there, make the best of it.
Huh.
And, what's the building? You got a low ceiling? Use it as you can,
Yeah.
and just kind of spread things out to make it, look as big as it can. And it was really that whole mentality, and it was all really about, the rock and roll side of it. I really never learned formal design until I started doing, um, like corporate, where it was a real finesse, or doing acts. As I started moving on, I got to work with some great acts that were a little more out of my taste range, what I listened to, but a lot more on the creative side. One of them being Neil Diamond, and I believe Marilyn Lowry was her name. And what is a big inspiration to me to take a design to that next level in finesse,
Yeah.
in creative timing, and not just slam the buttons and heavy metal kind of shows. And that was a big driving factor, and just some great designers, and looking how everybody did things, and just kind of learning along the way
Yeah.
how people did it.
So, but so you went from backline to what, lighting tech first, and then eventually got to the board, or how did that work?
No, the first, I was a lot of the local stuff. I was running a board. I was actually a house LD for a couple of clubs,
Oh, cool.
and started doing that. And I was going out as, I knew the console well by the time I hit a tour. The tour is when I really started being as a lighting tech and working my way up through that. It was a couple of years before I started, when I started doing large tours, that I actually got on the console. A
Yeah.
lot of it for the opening act. That was
Yeah.
where you got your first break. And then, if the opening act went out the next tour, they would, so that was the big jump there, as some of the opening acts progressed, and I was able to stay with them when they
Oh, that's
headlined.
cool. Yeah.
So that was a cool way. And learning a lot from being a stagehand. And at first, when I first went into the arenas, I didn't understand the level of competency that some of the stagehands have.
Yeah.
Some of them are just there to, make a good living, but don't really get into the technical side of it. They just find their niche to just, put food on the table. Others are there and had my gig 20 years before I did. And, they all know, how to do things differently, a different show every day. So I learned a lot from watching that and
Yeah.
how different crews got along, different companies use different gear, different companies package things differently, and you just saw the good and the bad, and you kind of learned from that as well.
So were you freelancing at that point, or you were working through a
Yeah,
company? Yeah, all
no,
freelance.
all freelance at that point. It was pretty much just word of mouth. You know, you need any help? Who's doing this tour? Who's doing that? He can't make it. She can't do this. Well, can I do it?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, and
And so this was, you were in Boston, so this would have been a lot of the Northeast companies like C Factor and stuff like
yeah,
that, or
correct. Yep. It
yeah,
was Polico, which became East Coast Lighting in
yeah, I remember
production.
Polico. Yeah,
Yeah, Bob and Andy up there started that, and they actually had the Jay Giles show. They had some of the first gear up in Boston, and they were the first that I ever worked with that had pre-rigged truss and lamp bars, and you didn't hang every single fixture in one lamp, one cable kind of setup.
right.
And they were the first ones. I believe they had it wasn't Soccerpex, it was another brand, lap cable. But it was the
Okay,
first time where we had like multi-cable and the breakouts, and it's like, wow, this is so much easier. And we were able to set up, in 2 hours, two sticks of truss, and ready to go.
which used to
Just
take you all
yeah,
day or
and
half a day or something. Yeah,
and aluminum par cans, I might mention,
yeah,
which
yeah.
which was a big plus in the industry.
Huge advancement. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's funny that when we think back, like the advancements that are being made now in lighting versus back then, going from steel to aluminum, it was like, ooh, now,
Someone asked me what was the biggest thing that was added to a lighting rig that made the biggest difference. You can think of all these fixtures and all
yeah,
these effects. How
yeah,
about a truss ladder? Because when I first
there you
started,
go.
you shinnied up the genie lift,
Oh my
or
God.
you shinnied up the cable, and some of those bundles of cable were a little hard to grab.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yep. And when I first saw a truss ladder, I said, "What a great idea!" Coming
Yeah,
down the cable was easy. Going up the cable was a little harder.
I'm sure when you go to these ESA events, some of those stories scare the hell out of those guys. It's like,
we are
no, please tell me you
we
didn't do that.
we're very lucky to be talking about it, and
Oh, hell
fall
yeah.
protection. A short story about that. Bob C called us, and I remember one time after loading a bunch of trucks in the rain, 2 in the morning, he called us up to the office and said, "Hey, I got an idea," and we wanted to bounce it off a few of us. And it was very close to what we see in fall protection now. And he thought about that in 1980 something.
Yeah.
And he saw it, and we said, "Oh, well, the stringing all those lines through the motors every day, that's going to slow us down and too cumbersome." And we didn't really latch on to that idea, and it didn't happen for a few years. But not too long after, someone engineered that type of system. Bob saw something in the future and was looking out for his guys, and I got to give him that credit.
I've always been I was close friends with Bob, and I've always been a big fan of Bob C. Like, I just think he's one of the, there's a lot of reason for the, lack of love towards him from some people. Like, he could be a bit of a tyrant at times, but he was a very innovative guy. Like
Oh
he
yeah,
really he was a smart guy that came up with a lot of really great ideas and concepts and ways to do things that other people weren't thinking of. It's just he didn't always give credit where credit was due on some of that stuff.
yeah.
And
He
so yeah,
nurtured some of the best. Some of the
oh
best
for
in the
sure,
industry came out of that shop from
absolutely,
the early '80s, and
a
still
long
working to the.
list, a long list of people.
But he was one of those type of people that tested you. After, like I said, loading 4 trucks in the rain, and getting out of there at 2 in the morning. You got to be back in a few hours, and
Yeah,
he would test you, and he'd hand you a broom and say, "Sweep the shop."
yeah.
And if you just took the broom and asked him, just said, "Whatever you need," and did it, you found yourself on a very nice tour for a few months.
Yeah.
If you took it and went, how come me, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah,
Yeah.
you might find yourself on Blue Oyster Cult for 30 shows in 31 days, which I remember some of the guys was a
That's funny.
brutal. Yeah,
That's
but if you can't handle the pressure of being asked to sweep the shop, you might not do so good when you show up at Madison Square Garden and might be in a tense situation and know how to handle it. So it
you
was
know
a
what?
little test.
I like that stuff though. Like I don't know how you are, but again, being older, one of the things is I really do like the old school way of doing things. Like I really do like when you stepped out of line, you got a foot up your ass and that kind of stuff. I think some of that stuff is definitely missing today. From my own son and other people's kids and stuff who have had it pretty easy for the most part, which is great. I mean, we all want to take amazing care of our kids and give them everything we can, but at the same time, sometimes you got to put your foot up their ass. you know.
I will admit, I was one of the ones that didn't take the broom with the smile a few times
Oh,
until I
really?
learned. Yeah, but
So how many times did you tour with Blue Oyster Cult then?
no, never had to do that one.
Yeah,
Never had to do that. That was one of the ones where we got it. There was some great shows back then. They weren't the longest tours, but there was things like the Simon and Garfunkel tour. I was on just for a very short period of that. And looking back on it, it was some of the nicest things I ever did was through that.
yeah. Did you ever do
Just
Rush
great accounts.
with Howard?
I filled in for someone for a few shows, and
Yeah,
I was around long enough to see some of the inner workings of that show, and that was a
yeah,
real family. They treated their crew like family. There was just it was a great situation for those guys.
yeah. Howard's a really good friend. He's been on the
Yes.
podcast a couple times and had some pretty cool stories. Uh, did he ever tell you the story about the when they were trying to pick up girls, and the girl said, "Okay, I'll go out with you, but only if you can bring me a horse."
No.
Oh, it's a great story. You're gonna have to go back to the podcast and listen to it.
No, that I'm interested in.
It's a
I run
great
into Howard
story.
every once in a while. Great designer.
I love the guy. He's a great man. You know what I mean? Like all of you guys are great designers, and I'm sure you guys all, sort of measure each other by how good your designs are. For me, I just like people, and Howard's just a great guy. I just, I pretty much chat with him every day through Instagram or something. He'll send me something stupid, and I'll send him back something stupid.
What
But
I remember about that Rush rig, and any of the stuff he did, I remember there was 28-volt dimmers in the shop that was specifically for Rush
yeah,
because of the aircraft landing lights, and there was so much beam action going on in that.
yeah, yeah.
That was the one thing that I remember about that show.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he did it a long time, and now I'm seeing rumors of them going back out again with a different drummer.
Wow,
So they said
interesting.
they'd never do that. So I don't know what's true and what's not true. God knows nobody would lie on the internet. It's all got to be true on social media. Kidding.
They've got that show just has a great in the background humor to it, and
Oh
it's a
yeah.
great show.
Well, sometimes it's not in the background. The sausage making machine and the washer
Yes,
and
yeah, the
dryer on
washer and
stage.
dryer. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my favorite. The
I
washer
mean,
and the
they're
dryer.
hilarious, and the intro videos that they did, where Getty's like an old Jewish woman or something. I mean, it's just funny stuff. Like they laugh at themselves all the
Yes.
time. So yeah, great band. I mean, obviously, I grew up in Canada, so I'm a Rush fan to start with,
Okay.
but I was a bass player and a singer growing up, and so you had to be a Geddy Lee just nut job. So I had every
Yeah.
Rickenbacker bass he'd had, and I bought a Steinberger when he got a Steinberger. I got a Fender when he got a Fender. Like I just had to have whatever Geddy. I had bass pedals on the floor. I bought a keyboard so I could learn to play subdivisions on the keyboard and stuff. It's stupid, but
I think that is one of the most humorous things I have ever seen in the industry is being on the stage side of a Rush show and watching all the 58-year-old air drummers in the first 20
it's
rows.
crazy, isn't it?
That is a moment to
And no
see.
girls. No girls, zero girls. It's not a place you go to pick up girls,
Yes.
a Rush concert. No. It's all just dudes playing air guitar and air drums and
Oh,
air whatever. Yeah. It's like there's a Long Island band called Dream Theater who same thing,
oh yeah,
all
yeah,
men
yeah. I
in the
remember
audience.
them.
Yeah, they're still touring. They're an incredible band. But no, it's funny. So So, we've covered some of your earliest stuff, and I mean, how did that turn into like? So you spent what 30 odd years on the road
Yeah.
touring?
Yeah, about 92-ish. I had gotten off the road from doing rock stuff for a little bit, and a friend had joined. He was worked with Audio Analyst
Okay, yeah, out of
as
Colorado.
one of their tech guys, and he moved on into a career with a company called New England Digital that made the Synclavier, the first
Oh
digital
wow,
workstation.
yeah.
And he was in their marketing department. He says, "Well, you've designed, you've done some rock and roll lighting. You ever do a trade show?" And I said, "Oh, of course. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
As you
sure."
do, yeah.
Yeah, and I just said, "Yeah, well, if I can light some drunk rock star running around a stage, I could
This is
easily light
easy.
up a
Yeah,
computer
of
station, right?"
course.
I didn't realize how much finesse there was. And about halfway through doing that project, they had gotten a little bit of a debate with their exhibit designer, and they said, "Well, you've designed some scenic stuff." And I said, "Well, yeah, sure." So I jumped into that side and started doing the entire exhibition and corporate event design.
For
And
Synclavier.
I didn't really, yeah, for that show.
Oh
And then
wow,
he moved on to another company, and it was called Data Translations. And then it went into a company that was doing digital video editing software called Media 100. And they kind of had the first all in one digital video workstation that was available for a fraction of the price of an Avid system. So they got a lot of traction, and I started getting to do some really large exhibits with them, and they passed me on to all their clients. And without ever handing a business card, we had a booming business during the .com era, but it was
interesting.
all technology. So we
Yeah,
just dove into that and never looked back. And that's when I dragged my wife into the office and said, "I need help."
yeah.
And we knew so many people in production that I didn't really have to have staff a whole company because I had such resource of talented people.
So you were just putting the whole production together, the
Yep.
team and
The
everything.
whole thing.
So,
Yep.
oh wow, that's
Yeah,
a
so
cool
we
gig.
started doing really big stuff where we were doing exhibitions in more of a rock and roll style. So everything I learned about how to package and how to tour a show, we brought into the exhibit world. We weren't the first ones out there to be using fabric, but we were one of the first to be hanging, rental truss and fabric and lots of moving lights, lots of color. We started using projection, and then as LED walls came into where they could be affordable to bring out to the trade show world. We started doing that, and a lot of companies said, "Well, this is great because we don't have to store all this. It looks big. It was vibrant. Our message could change all the time with the content." So we kind of started doing trade shows, rock and roll style. One time I even used kabukis to get my drops out of the air faster.
Wow.
So we didn't have to wait for the truss to come down before we could pack it up and leave. And we were getting, a lot of success with that. So
Yeah. I mean
it was
that
fun.
that market, the tech companies and probably like the E3 show, like the video game stuff, really seemed to
Oh yeah.
drive that real entertainment, rock and roll, theatrical kind of look into the
Oh
trade
yeah.
shows. That's where I saw it the most,
NAB.
anyway. Yeah, NAB is another one. Yeah,
NAB was another
yeah,
one. Comdex was the granddaddy of shows in Las
yeah,
Vegas. I think it was 135,000 attendees at that show.
yeah.
So there was a lot of places to show off your craft there.
Yeah, one time I was at NAB and I think it was the first time I ever went to it. It was probably late 90s or something. And I was in the elevator and like five Sony guys come into the elevator. And I said, wow, you guys are all with Sony, I guess. And he goes, yeah, yeah, we are. And I said, this must be a big show for you guys. He goes, yeah, I think we have 9,000 people here this year. I mean, I was like, what? How could one company have 9,000 people at a trade show?
Oh
That
yeah.
was just blew my
Between all the
mind.
training and all this, the general
Yeah.
sessions,
Yeah.
but one of the best people in the business, Roy Bickle, just such an industry
Yeah.
innovator, and just saw him last December out at Rocklet's conference, and he's still at it, and he is just was such an inspiration to all of us in the industry, and he was the head rigger at the Las Vegas Convention Center for a lot of the exhibition contractors.
Really?
And he just brought something. He saw all of a sudden NAB. You looked up and there was a sea of lighting rigs.
Yeah.
And it was amazing at how many points were hung in that hall so quickly, and how our, the live event technology just immersed itself in that world, and how much work people were getting, not
True, huh?
not only from the people designing it and the vendors, but to the people working there as well.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. If you didn't remember your motor power, well, I ordered all my power. Well, you forgot your motor power, and you showed up on site, and you got in the line for service orders. You could be hours and even days before you got your motor power. And a mistake like that in the trade show world, it's one thing when you go into an arena and you're the only production there that day, and everybody caters to you. And if you need power, yeah, sure, we'll get right on it.
Yeah.
But when you're just one of 700 lighting rigs in the room that day,
Yeah.
and you don't have your paperwork together, you find out just how quickly you can lose money as a vendor. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was a learning
Absolutely.
experience for us.
So, did you start a company around that whole thing, or was
I
that just
did.
basically you and your wife? Or
Yeah, just myself and my wife and a few other people that we brought in. It was a couple people in the shop, but really we just had a minimal staff, and we just hired great production people from the touring industry, or from a local people that I had worked with for so long,
yeah,
that it was great to just have all those resources, but not have to have a sustainable company to
yeah,
meet payroll in case it
right,
slowed
of course,
down.
yeah,
Unfortunately, the end of the dot-com industry, about 2002,
yeah,
it just imploded on itself.
yeah,
And we switched back to live and started doing other things. So it's
yeah,
nice to have those skills during a time when it was booming, but also, to have the knowledge of when to just say either the company has to get real big
yeah,
or you got to give it up. And
yeah,
we didn't want to support a payroll. I didn't have the inclination to have a large company, regardless, because my real love was in drafting and designing. So that was kind of the later point. But
did you ever buy gear in that business? Like, did you?
minimal,
Yeah,
minimal, just enough to get by. And then we would have our conventional, a few dimmer racks, and all, and then we would just rent our um,
yeah.
the any of the intelligent lighting at the time. It
That's
was
pretty
wasn't
common. Yeah, that's pretty common.
Yeah,
Is you buy the infrastructure and rent the fixtures, because everybody has their own thoughts or needs or whatever for fixtures. But I'm seeing more and more of these sort of hybrid design firms who, it started where they were just buying their own consoles. They'd buy initially Hogs and then eventually MA consoles, and you know as they were owning all these MA consoles and looking at their financials at the end of the year, they were going, hey, this gear is actually earning us pretty good
yeah,
money. So next thing you know, they own 200 or 300 moving lights, 1,000 feet of truss, and they're basically dry hire lighting companies that are then renting their own gear back to those production companies who
exactly.
are doing the tour or whatever. So I see that more and more often now, where they're
And then
designing their own products into the tour.
and then the pandemic hits.
Well, yeah, and then you're carrying big expenses and stuff. But
Yeah,
but the
yeah,
nice thing
but
about
it was.
owning gear when the pandemic hit is you used
Yeah,
that as currency, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
And with
definitely.
with my company, we saw a lot of companies like that where they needed the money to pay their mortgage or to pay to survive or whatever. And so they were selling off gear, and there's always buyers. Even in a pandemic, there's always buyers.
Installs, yeah, installs
No,
were
but
going good.
even just deep pocket, well invested, well funded lighting rental companies, sound rental companies who are like, hey, the pandemic's going to end at some point. I want to have all this gear when it ends.
Yeah.
And they've done very well with that mentality or that philosophy, right? So then, so after that, you went back on tour, or
Yeah, a lot of it was doing corporate and staying with the corporate. We still stayed in the corporate and trade show industry. We just didn't do the production end of it.
I see.
We didn't would want to do the logistics. We didn't want to do the storage. we were pretty much design and go.
Yeah.
And that was some of the stuff that we were really lucky to work on. It was pretty picture conceptual design. Do with it what you want. Just, seek a structural engineer and make sure that the design is going to work.
Yeah.
And that was above, our pay grade to engineer it. So we just kind of fell into that design only. And I guess it was right around 2003, 2004 where I went ballistic on Vectorworks. I just found a passion for that side of it, and I really liked the design side of it, and maybe helping out getting it started, but not staying on for the duration of the production. And a lot of the exhibit stuff, it was a lot of it was bid, and I kind of did a business model that was, we're not going to do the production, so it's a billable time for the design side. So if they said no, we still got something out of it, which
I
was a
see.
good decision for us.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. You're not just investing time into, an empty well.
But
Yeah.
it was something very early on. I believe it was in around 1986. And a funny gear story, we had a Commodore 128, not the 64. This was the extra
Ooh.
powerful
Yeah. There you go.
128.
Twice as
But
powerful.
Michael Tate had a theory on early gear of don't use anything on the show you can't buy at Walmart at 4:30 in the afternoon on a Sunday afternoon. And because of that, his color controller, this was back when he was still doing lighting, and his color controller was based on a Commodore 64. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was pretty early technology, but it worked. And I had that computer sitting out in front of house, and one of the local hands, we were doing an overnight, and he came in the next day and he says, "Hey, I noticed you had a Commodore, and I have this disc. I'm not sure what it is, some kind of draft, some computer drawing software of some kind." He says, "I don't have a computer and I have no use for it. If you want it, you can have it." And I don't even remember the name of the software. I wish I did, but it was a very simple drawing program, and all of a sudden my eyes opened up to how much time was being spent on a day off. While all my buddies were hanging out down at the bar and having a good time on a day off, I'm up on a hotel bed drawing the park hand symbol a couple of hundred times.
Yeah.
And it was tedious. And all of a sudden, because of a Commodore 64 and a very nice person that gave me a disc, I wish I knew who it was and could thank them. If you're out there somewhere and you remember the story, I doubt you do, but thank you. But it was a changing moment where there was, it was about that time, about 85, 86, where digital communication was just starting,
Yeah.
where people were starting to use the computer to design and to start looking at how to package a show, spreadsheets for the production team. So that was a big innovation
You
to
know,
our industry.
it's funny that you say that because I think a lot of people who listen are younger and they are like, "What do you mean laying on the bed drawing, park hand symbols or whatever?" But I remember that I think it was my company. We were giving away swag, or maybe somebody else was, where it was a template of symbols, a symbol template for everything from park hands to whatever, like anything that would hang on a rig, basically. And it was such a successful piece of swag. Like
Oh
it was
yeah.
almost like selling on the black market at the bar later that night and stuff, because everybody wanted it. And when you think back to that now, like how popular this template was just because it made drawing park hands easier or whatever, right? It's shocking because, again, who would think to hand draw something today?
I just moved into a new place, so they're not on the wall right now, but I have my templates are framed
Oh,
in a
really?
picture frame and hang on the wall right next to me. So there's not a day I don't look at them and remember what it took to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
The same thing of hanging park hands one at a time, one at a time, one
Yeah.
cable, one lamp, one cable. And,
It's
we
wild.
forget about that, of
Yeah.
just how easy it is now but then again, these shows were just supporting an album. They weren't the moneymaker. So these spectacle shows we have now with, 37, 40 trucks, whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
that's where the industry has gone, where that's where the money's being made. So what we used to put out there was a cost to the artist to support the album,
Yeah.
and now it's the money driving.
Of course.
So
Yeah. Well, and it's
it,
big money. I mean, one of my friends on Facebook, and I forget which band it was. It's a country artist who's playing. Oh, it's Stapleton, Chris Stapleton. Somebody posted online, "Hey, I have 2 tickets for sale tonight. We can't go, or tomorrow night, or whenever it is. We can't go." Selling them at face value, $490 each. I'm like, what? For Chris Stapleton? I mean, he's a great country artist. Don't get me wrong, but $490. So it's $1,000 plus probably $100 to park, plus $100 for a few beers. I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus,
And I look at that. I think when that first show I ever saw, Elton John, I think it was 250, 350, and 450 for a ticket.
Yeah.
And when it went up to when it went up $1, it's like, hold on a second here.
Yeah.
Things are
Yeah.
getting out of hand.
Yeah.
When they went up, and that's, wait a minute, that's our beer money for the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we look at the price of the ticket and the memorable shows that we saw there. Okay, they might have only been 3 or 4 trucks, but some of the most memorable shows I ever, saw were just that.
Yeah.
And, were the first time I saw Queen
Yeah.
and looked up at the spectacle there and saw, what a performance it was. Now, granted, we didn't need, a mountain of LED
Yeah.
effects
Yeah.
behind the artist, which I think kind of takes away from it sometimes. And that's how
Me
old
too.
school I am.
Yeah.
I don't look at most designs as being all about the artist. And there's only a few out there that keep the artist in that scale. There are a few artists out there that really take notice, and I think that's the good designers now don't overpower with that lighting,
I agree.
spectacle behind the band and that little dwarf of an image of the artist in the bottom of the picture, and half the time now it's a silhouette where you can't even see the
Well,
emotion on it.
I've overused this a lot of times, but I had Mark Brickman on the podcast, and you probably know him, I guess, very well because he was a Northeasterner guy too. But he said, "Yeah, I saw the Stones last week," and he said, it kind of bothered me." And this was I don't know if it was the last tour or 2 tours ago, but it was when they had like I think it was 4 or 5 iPhone video screens, basically. And he said, it's a beautiful design, but I didn't like it. And I said, "Really? Why?" And he said, "Because those massive video screens made Mick Jagger look small on stage. When you look at the stage, he looked like a little bug, and you can't make Mick Jagger disappear,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And so, versus like I looked at some video the other day of the Stones playing at Jazz Fest in New Orleans, and it wasn't a massive production. It was sort of on the Jazz Fest stage, and it was amazing. Like the Stones sounded and looked great. Mick Jagger dancing around at 80 years old. It was really, really great, And so back to Mark Brickman, he said one of the designs that he loved that he did the most, and I'm expecting to hear Pink Floyd Division Bell tour or something. He said it was Neil Young at Coachella. And I said, "Really? What was the rig?" And he said 16 follow spots. That's it.
Yeah.
16
And
follow spots.
but there was something in, if you did not have a good rapport with your follow spots every night, and it made a break, it was such a deciding factor on your show
Yeah.
of, just how much those people were into your show. And it might have been, 8 people that were 2 days from retirement and didn't care about your show, and they just did 6 other shows that week, and they really don't care.
Yeah.
But to just get them into that, hey, we got a job to do here, we're all professionals, and please, help me out here, and get a good rapport with those people.
Yeah.
That was your show, and if your rig ever went down, you still had a show.
No, I
And I remember
completely get
seeing
it.
that. I forget what show it was. There was someone in a stadium. I believe it was Bon Jovi, and they had a very, very large show, and somehow they lost the lighting rig went down, and all they had was 6 follow spots out front of house. And all of a sudden, and don't quote me on that because I'm not positive it was Bon Jovi, but I believe it was. And it was in a flood as I remember, there was a water situation because of a heavy downpour, and something happened that the lighting rig was down.
This was in
And I
Boston?
was, yeah, at Gillette Stadium, or what was Foxborough Stadium prior
Yeah.
to, or one of those two. And I remember seeing it where nothing but follow spots. And it was a desperate situation
Yeah.
because of the massive amount of light that was around the stage. And suddenly their eyes had adjusted to that. And when that was gone, it made the problem even worse. So I learned that from taking a very brief stint as a board op for Phantom of the Opera for a fill-in of how dark that show was and how few fixtures they used on it. And once your eyes adjusted to that light level, it didn't take much to make your retinas go wow.
Yeah.
And that was, but when your eye is used to that mountain of gear, every moment is so heavily illuminated that to try to get an intimate moment with one or two fixtures is almost
Yeah,
impossible.
it's hard to see
Yeah.
nuance when everything's on at full blast and
Yeah.
you've got like JDC1 strobes blasting you in the face and all of that stuff. I like a little bit of I don't know. Just I like simpler stuff for the most part. Like LED screens gone mad has
Yeah.
for me it's just changed what shows look like. I just don't like it as much.
I
I
agree.
go to see a band to see the band, which is weird because I'm a production, I've been in this industry for over 30 years, but when I want to see a band, I want to see the band. I want to hear what they sound like and I want to see them. Uh, I'm not necessarily there for the spectacle. However, and I've been reminded, I'm also not the consumer, right? I'm not the person
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
targeting. The person they're targeting is looking for that crazy wild light show. And trust me, I like those. They're very nice and stuff. It's just like if I was going to see Led Zeppelin, if they were going to get back together, and it's my one sort of show that I never saw that really bugs me because I grew up as a huge fan of Led Zeppelin and stuff, and it just never worked out. But you never think that your favorite artists are going to die off and be gone forever, right?
Mm.
Like you just don't think of that back then, anyways. And but I wouldn't want to see them in a stadium with 1,000 or 1,500 moving lights. I'd
Yeah.
rather see them, in
An old park hand rig, like
an old
like you
park hand
remembered it.
rig in a
Yeah.
theater with a dozen moving lights and a bunch of follow spots and some park hands. Like I'd love to see them, the way they were, not the way they would be today or whatever. So that just
I
makes me
think
old, probably. Hey kids,
and a
get off
lot
my
of it
lawn.
is a lot of people, because of the nature of the sales, that the shows obviously have to be bigger to make that
Right, of
sale,
course.
of those numbers, and to make the tour work. But when the crowd is looking away from the artist 90% of the show, it's bad enough that they're on the phone for a good portion of their
Yeah,
show and
true,
missing
huh?
that moment,
Yeah,
because there's so many professional videos of every show out there. There's really no reason to be taking any video. Enjoy the moment. You'll never get it back.
yeah,
But all the things that are making you look up and away from the artist, the one that you just paid $400 to see,
yeah,
you're looking at swirling patterns on LED fixtures, and you're looking at turning around, looking at where the lasers are hitting.
yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, cool, but you're not going to remember that, as opposed to the emotion on the keyboard player's face as they were
Right,
struggling with the
exactly.
hardest part of the song.
Exactly.
And some of the heroes now are of artists that I didn't really pay attention to because they weren't my type of music. But you look at anything that Jeff Ravitz does, you're never looking away from Mr. Springsteen on that show.
Yeah.
He is why you're there. He is the emotion of the show. And it doesn't all just fall back to, well, look, if you want to see the detail, look at the video screen. And it's just such a nice way to do that. Suna Ray Creative is one of the best designers, I think, in modern design, of how the artist still stays in focus to the big picture.
Yeah,
And
she's great.
and it's just such phenomenal work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other artists there that just know how to keep that balance of where the artist is and where the audience is looking. And it's like there's nothing up there 60 that you can't see on YouTube
Yeah.
that's
But
60 feet in the air.
how annoying is it when you're sitting at front of house and all you see is freaking cell phone screens all the way up to
Yeah.
the stage,
Yeah,
It's
well, it's I guess what people want to do, and we're certainly not going to change that habit
no,
anytime soon.
no.
But I just look at it like you'll never relive that moment and what it's like to be, a screaming crowd all at the same moment. And so many people have to look up for their phone to see what everybody what just went wow at.
Yeah.
And they miss that pop, that one moment of
Yeah.
excitement.
Yeah. Well, I
Other
mean,
than
do you have kids? They're
no, I
probably,
do not.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, it's when you look at your kids, like I constantly, for 10 years, I've told my son that is you're missing so much, because you're sitting looking down at your
Yeah.
phone all the time. You're missing so much. And I miss a lot because I look at my phone a lot, but not near as much as the average, now 20-year-old. But,
There's t- there's times when I have literally because oops sorry
that's all good.
because of the job I have 12. At one point I had 12 monitors surrounding me
Yeah.
between all the visualizers and the console and all
Wow.
and then I think the hardest part of my job was which keyboard was which screen,
Yeah.
and when I go on vacation I purposely take my cell phone and I put it in the safe and I don't take it out, and
Wow.
just to
Good for
be
you.
away from
I
tech
wish I
for
could.
12 days straight. And it's like,
Jesus.
I'm sorry, there was a time when I used to live without this, and to get that back is actually quite pleasant. To
It's
just and it's
amazing you
hard to
can do
do.
that. Yeah, I
The
can't.
the trick is don't bring your charger.
Well, but the problem is I have an online
Yeah,
business that
yeah,
I
there you
do need
go.
to stay attached to, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So, yeah,
I
I mean if I lock my cell phone up in the safe for 12 days, I think
yeah.
I'd come back to a bunch of dead people and no customers. So, it wouldn't be good. It
You
would
know,
be bad.
we were speaking of headphones earlier. You know, one of the biggest innovations in this industry over the years was a comfortable headset.
Yeah.
If anybody remembers the old blue Clearcom headsets and what it was like to sit through, bad enough a 2 hour show, but to sit through a rehearsal day with those on it, you came home with your head just aching from those. And
I
now you look at it, they're feather light, so comfortable. But that was one of the old thing when I was thinking about, well, what was some of the, your favorite gear over the years? And I was trying to think about it. And it's like, well, some of my favorite gear was not anything to do with technology and lighting. It was about comfort
Yeah, it
and,
usually isn't.
you know,
It's a chair, a front of house chair, or like it's always things like that. That's what people always say.
you might have sold one of these. I've seen them out on eBay, but I'm not sure if people actually are joking or not. But the old Avo consoles before the QM500, it was the same size as the QM500. I believe it was the 8800,
Yeah,
and it had a little pin matrix in the drawer,
of
as I
course.
remember.
Yeah.
And everybody said, well, there was a fight over it. If someone tried to push anything else but an Avo, it turned into an argument between the promoter. It was like, no, Avo, that's it. And people would have to jump through hoops, but if your artist was good enough, you could hold to that. But they would always try to start pushing other consoles on it, and there was nothing wrong with these other consoles, but it wasn't an Avo. And why did we like the Avo so much over a Cellco? Because the case was long enough to sleep in under the stage
Oh
when you
my
got a break.
God, that's
That
hilarious.
literally, that literally was one of the reasons we all loved Avos, is that you could get a quick nap under the deck. If
That's
if you didn't have
wild.
the
I
bus,
didn't
if you
know
didn't
that.
have the buses, if you didn't have the buses there, an Avo case made a great cot.
I had Steve Warren from Avo on last week. It actually just came out today or yesterday, I think it came out, and that was a fun conversation. He's living in Portugal now because Robe just bought the company. I'm sure
Yes,
you knew.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah, one of our partners.
yeah. So
One of the funniest things about Avo, and I don't think it was very well known, was that nobody had redundancy back then. There was no secondary console, there was
yeah,
no backups. There was literally one console, and that was it. And if it went down at 725, you found yourself having to play microprocessor technician, which not a lot of us had that training. And a lot of times, I remember one time at Madison Square Garden at a radio station show after everybody had put in their looks on a Cellco. It was a brand new console, and the Molex on one of the boards wasn't seated correctly and popped out. And of course, 725. full crowd, got 5 minutes, and console's down.
Yikes.
And I wasn't very knowledgeable about those kind of things at the time. And you find yourself, you popped it open, you trace that problem, and you looked at it, and pop that back in, and the shit came back on, and my heartbeat just was, I was freaking
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But somehow, some way we fixed it. But the thing about Avo was this was a gentleman by the name of Rob Steele, and I remember calling him from a payphone in the lobby.
Great guy.
And Rob was always picked up that phone, didn't care what time it was. And I remember one time on a console down, and unfortunately it was the opening act was in the dark, as I remember on this show. But until I got it fixed, there was no backup, and there was a little secondary connector that there was redundancy in the processing boards in that console. So you actually had somewhat of a backup console for some of the cards, and I believe it was a A to D converter
Oh,
that had gone down, and sure enough, he walked me through it, and whew, thank God,
yeah. You
it
know,
was
it's funny because
got me through it.
Steve, on the podcast we did, talked about a situation he had. I think it was Paul Simon, where the console wasn't working or whatever, and he, whipped out a soldering iron and opened up the board and was able to fix it. And something happened. I can't remember the whole story, but like during the show or after the show or something, somebody was like, the venue smells like it's on fire, and everyone was freaking out because there was a fire, and he came to figure out that he had left his soldering iron on, and it was burning something plastic or something. I can't remember exactly, but he was quite embarrassed, and all eyes were on Steve Warren at that point, and he tells the story a hell of a lot better than I do because I don't remember all the facts, but it was kind of funny. He said that was one of his biggest goofs. So I want to get into what you're doing now because I know you've been with Vectorworks. So first of all, how cool is that you were talking about, like, you were designing stuff using Vectorworks back in the early 2000s, I think, right? How long has
Yeah, all the
Vectorworks
way
been
back
around?
till 98. I think I bought my first copy in 98.
Yeah.
And by about 2003, 2004, a very good friend was working at the company, and is still with the company, and is one of our vice presidents now, or of our offices, I should say. Brought me into a Macworld show. Actually, I walked into a Macworld show with my laptop and walked up to the person. I said, I've been trying to use this and trying to get better at it. And I said, could you take a look at and give me some, honest critique on how I could get better, and any comments would be appreciated. And I walked in, and this gentleman said, wow, that's pretty good stuff. Would you mind leaving your laptop here so we can run this on the screen? And I said, well, I got to kind of keep my laptop. And he
Yeah.
says, well, reach out because we could use images like that. And I reached out, and this gentleman had asked me from the marketing department if I would come out and speak to, I think it was LDI,
Oh,
or it might have been Macworld was one of the first ones, but I came out there, and I'd been around a stage for a long time, under the stage, over the stage, under it, on the stage when the house wasn't in, but
yeah.
never on the stage, so quite uncomfortable there. And I was kind of nervous to get up on that podium and talk about how I was using Vectorworks. And they had kind of asked me when I came in, they wanted a little bit of name drop, not name dropping, but just, who have you worked for? And it obviously helps marketing. And I was kind of a little hesitant. It's like, well, that's not really what I'm about. I don't really, they're just a bunch of people I worked for. It's not really, me. And I said, how about I just get into the software? So they said, well, please, and wrote up about 2 paragraphs of who I am and what I did. And I got up there for about 30 seconds. My hands was just sweating. I'm so nervous to get up there. And there wasn't a whole lot of people out there to start. And about 2 minutes into it, I said, enough of that. Let's draw.
Oh,
And I
wow.
jumped up and I just started doing what I felt very natural using the software, and I was using it in kind of a different way. And within a few minutes, I had the aisles clogged of people looking at just how I was using it. So I felt very comfortable, and I found a nice little knack of being able to get up and demonstrate software, which isn't the easiest thing to do, especially if it crashes, which
Which
it
it
doesn't
usually
do very
does when you're
often.
doing
But
demos.
well, Murphy's Law will say it won't crash in 6 months, but as soon as you get up in front of a crowd, it will.
Exactly. I know.
And I had a passion for going out there and getting people excited about it. And I love the product, and it's a great company to work for. I work with, just such an amazing team of engineers that I'm constantly learning on something that I always had interest in, and of how software works, but I'll never get into engine, coding and all that,
Yeah.
as opposed to just how do you get a feature, what does it take to bring a product to life in software world?
Yeah.
And that was so much different than what I had ever done in the road world or, in the production world. And it's a challenge for me now, and I get to think, every day, and I get to do something that's completely different, and I don't have to go out there and get chain grease all over myself or schlep forot. And I
Yeah.
still like going out and doing that every once in a while just to
I get it. Yeah.
remember, what it was. But
But I
you
mean,
know
it had to be cool though, like, being a user of the product for I guess about 20 years or something, and then suddenly, the company says, "Hey, why don't you come work for us?" Or however that happened. But so your role there, you're on like a support kind of side, I think, or
I'm with the product marketing team, so we go trade shows and we listen to users. We see, what people are doing with it. We always looking for great imagery, always looking for people that are using it in a creative way. If anybody has anything they'd like to showcase, please reach out to me. I'm very easy to find on the Vectorworks site. We always are looking for ways to help the young designers and the old designers as well, people
yeah,
that just want to learn a new skill. So I love doing that. There's so many of the people out there that I still stay in touch with that helped me years and years ago. And I'll hear from every once in a while. It's 2 in the morning. Help! I got a drawing. I can't figure this out. I got something that's got to be in there at 8 in the morning. I'm up all night. I'll get calls at 2 in the morning saying, "Dude, I'm really, really in trouble here." And I'll help them out because they helped me at one, or even if they didn't help me, I still like helping. But I love seeing that part of the visual technology being able to be prevised, and not just because I work for Vectorworks. I always had an interest in that previs side of
yeah,
get things right before you ever walk into the venue, and solve all your problems in a digital world, and you look real good when you get out to the real world. And I just love to see that technology coming forward. We saw it in our head. There's a lot of people out there that still they don't need previs. They don't need a design. They don't need to put it, on paper. They'll just tell somebody, "Hey, I want this thing bathed in a nice blue. You figure out where the fixtures go. You figure out the patch, all that kind of stuff." And they just know what they want to see in their mind.
yeah,
I know what I see in my mind. Now I want to put it onto a screen, so in an animation now. And and now with we were talking briefly earlier about AI,
yeah.
and I
Which I
think
want to get
that's such a
into.
fueling things. Yeah,
Yeah.
whenever a good time for that is.
Well, we
But
we
it's
can
just
go into it now. I mean,
yeah,
you guys, I think, are going to be on the cutting edge of AI as it relates to our
we are.
industry. But I recently tripped over one of your users, and I won't tell you who it is yet, but you may have even seen the image already. So I had a conversation with this gentleman a couple of weeks, no, probably about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, about AI. And I just said, "Have you done any testing on any of this stuff?" He goes, "No, not really." And I said, "Well, what about even just image generation? I know there's a lot of content being created uh, on the spot at shows and then pushed out to the screens and stuff. Have you got?" "No, no, not really." And I said, "Man, you got to take a look at this." And I showed him a couple things that I had just created using AI. And he was like, "Whoa." So he comes to me the next day and he goes, "Thanks a lot." And I said, "What?" And he said, "I've gone down a rabbit hole on Vectorworks AI. And the good news is I've become an expert at it. The bad news is I've been completely non-productive. Like I'm doing no work, and I'm just down this crazy rabbit hole. So here, I'm going to share on the screen here with you one of the images that he created. He created a bunch of them, and this was one of them, which is his dog. And this gentleman is a bit of a gun guy, so obviously the dog is heavily armed. And so, do you know who this is? Can you guess?
Is the character the dog
No, no, I'm
character?
saying who would have generated this image?
Oh, who? Yeah.
Patrick Dearson.
No, no, I'm not
You're
familiar.
not familiar with Patrick Dearson? Oh,
No,
so
but if not, if Patrick's out there, please
oh,
introduce yourself on our site. I'd love to meet you.
so this
Uh,
is something that Patrick created apparently on Vectorworks AI.
no, comical.
Nothing to do with lighting whatsoever. His dog on a shark with a bunch of weapons, and
I thought when you first asked that, as I know there was a pug that was out there as a character in a famous movie. But I'll tell you, I was a little hesitant because when I first, we all remember when the internet first came out. Well, not
I
all
do.
of us
Yep.
remember,
Yeah.
but for the people that do remember when the internet came out, we all took it with a grain of salt. We were seeing QuickTime movies and 20 minutes to hear you've got mail. It wasn't the most fascinating. It was good technology and it was going to evolve into something cool. But at the time, all right, a QuickTime movie was pretty jittery and it
Yeah.
just took 25 minutes to
Yeah.
download.
Yeah. Well, and
But
that horrific sound when you're connecting to the hotel room
yes, yes,
phone,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
for your internet. And you could either call your wife or whatever, or you could get on the internet. You couldn't do
yeah,
both at the same
exactly.
time. Yeah.
Um, it was just, we all had reservations about it, but I don't think anybody really saw the true potential, how it's going to change the lives. Now, AI, I looked at kind of the same way. When I first saw it, we heard about all the negative, how people were going to start using it to do fake political ads and everything else that they shouldn't be doing with it. Well, it was the same way when you first saw YouTube, that you could either watch kids bounce down, the stairs off their skateboard and some comical moments there, but you could also look up on how electronic circuits really work and what is the function, how does a capacitor actually store that energy
Yeah.
and all those kind of great things. And you look on wiki, and if you're looking up on what Paris Hilton did last weekend, you might get some false information.
Yeah.
But if you're looking up capacitors, you're probably going to get a pretty factual, and it leads to more learning.
Yeah.
So I think the same way, in a way, that AI is going down that road, that it's can be used very, very creatively. It can be used in creative ways that aren't so politically correct or socially correct, I might say. But at the same time, I looked at an analogy when I first started using it of how many times that I tried to work with a client and going in to design a show, and it's like, oh, okay, you go into a meeting and you pull out the ideas and you come up with a couple of ideas, a couple of packages for a proposal, and three or four variations of kind of that topic, and giving them some different options.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk in there and they're not in the great mood that they were in when they were at the meeting. They had a bad weekend or something happened.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk in there with four proposals that you spent 8-10 hours each on, and you walk in, she not like that, don't like that, don't like that. The third one, yeah, we kind of don't like the colors in it.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, great. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to take another swing at it. Well, with AI, we build kind of here's a couple of different structure setups, what the venue will allow, what the budget or, the shipping budget will allow to get it there, or, the labor hours to set it up. And you try to put something in that rough white models, and then you run the AI generator and get 20 different looks in 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and all by some simple prompts, text prompts, both positive and negatives. It's like, I don't want it to look like a holiday Christmas festival, no reds, no greens, but I want it to look, a hazy room, corporate ballroom, blah, 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 blah. And in a matter of 20 minutes, you've got 20 beautiful ideas And then, oh, well, we like number 3, we like number 7, we like number 8, and we like 14. Okay, now we'll do full packages on those.
Yeah.
So you've really honed in that design idea to save yourself a lot of aggravation, a lot of time, and there's the moral factor of, oh, people would have done that creative work. Well, not in that sense, and you probably wouldn't have got the job if you didn't have an arsenal of cool looks to show them. So that's where I see the potential of AI is coming up with conceptual ideas down the line. The feature will evolve to where we can actually say, okay, we'll put this type of crowd into the seats in this image, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But it's an evolving technology. And like I said, when I first saw it, I just heard a lot of negative things about AI, so I didn't jump on board as fast as some of my colleagues at work did. And once they started using the same thing, they were up until 3 in the morning coming up with some great stuff. And it's, to me, just amazing what you can see out there in a matter of minutes on conceptual
I
ideas.
agree completely. Again, the conspiracy theory side of it all is that, okay, so how long until the client just goes directly to Vectorworks and bypasses the designer altogether, because you can just put some information into Vectorworks, boom, it spits out a design for you. And
Hmm. I can see the concern, but honestly, there'll never be a button in Vectorworks that say "Design Cool Show." There's always that knowledge of how things go together. There's always that knowledge of how things get built, is how it packages, how it ships, how it's supported. There's never going to be anything, I believe, that will take the human thought process out of it, to the point where someone actually has to think about where that's going to break apart and fit into a set cart, how that's going to package. And yes, well, AI isn't going to be able to tell you that when things go together that you put protection in between. And so there's all that kind of thing that I think will be limited. Well, yeah, I guess it can,
yeah, I mean, it's
but
going to
they'll
learn
always,
very quickly. This is the
but they'll,
thing.
they'll,
It's going to keep
there'll
learning.
always be someone there that has to realize that, there's human factors involved in any production. So I think there's, so much thought that goes into making a production work, that logistics, and then there's that you can't tell AI can't tell a crew how to get along, and
Yeah.
there's always that kind of thing
Yeah.
that makes the work, the
Well, but
work.
here's the thing that I think. Like, I think from a music production standpoint, music live event standpoint, you're going to have more emotion involved. You're going to have a lighting designer who knows the artist personally, knows how he or she thinks,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
type of mood that he or she wants to project or whatever, and all the nuance that the designer can then put into the show based on that human interaction with the artist and knowledge of the artist, knowledge of the music and all that stuff. But where I think it changes is when you talk about the business you spent a lot of time in, the corporate conventional stuff or convention stuff. Um, to me, is a little more vanilla. It's a little more, hey, we need light here, we need light here, this needs to be taken care of here. And where AI can come in too is all the tedious stuff. The the infrastructure that needs to come with that moving light package, the trussing and cabling and all of those things that it can put together quite quickly and easily, based on, again, learning the knowledge that it creates over doing a couple of shows. And so it's interesting. Like, I can understand why designers are concerned, but again, people tried to stop Henry Ford from shipping cars and, said, why do we need to get rid of horses and buggies and stuff, right?
yes.
It's just going to create problems and blah, blah, blah. Well, where would we be today if we stayed with horse and buggy? And so we went to cars, and then we went to faster cars, and then we went to bigger cars and different cars and airplanes and all sorts of other modes of transportation. And it's progress. And so this is obviously part of progress. And I, for one, and we talked about this before we went on the air, I'm pretty excited
Excuse
about
me.
it. No problem.
Sorry.
No worries. You were talking about your allergies. But I for one, am pretty excited about the tools that are becoming available, and the tools like with you guys, with Vectorworks, the tools within the tools. You know, the stuff that's being added to a great product like Vectorworks to make it more powerful, or to shave time off of the tedious, repetitive work that you shouldn't have to do anymore because you've done it 100 times. So why can't I just say, hey, do it like that last one, you know? And it goes in and goes, okay, I know how you did the last one. I'll go ahead and do that here, you know?
Uh, There's there's so much to be achieved, in the next couple of years with Vectorworks, taking our first round at it and getting, feedback from people using it on where they want it to go. So it's really, it's something that's, just opening up a can of, not opening up a can of worms, but just really, just getting started
Yeah,
on
it's at the
this.
front
That,
end. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So
I mean,
anybody that has comments,
the whole AI thing is at the front end, but it's moving quickly, you know. And I told you earlier about some of the music stuff that I've been messing
yes.
around with, where you know you can create music very very easily and very quickly using some already available apps out there, music, video, websites, presentations, all kinds of things. This is all low hanging fruit. How far is it going to go beyond that? Because if I told you, you know, 3 or 4 years ago that, you know, I could put a few words in and it'd spit out a song on the other end based on those few words that I just input, you'd be like, yeah, I don't think we got that technology yet, you know, but we do. So,
It gives skills to people that might not have the ability to draw by hand.
yeah.
Line artists. My wife is a very, very talented artist, trained classical artist.
Mm-hmm.
And she often would put those things into a drawing that I couldn't through Photoshop or just hand drawing of plants and people.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that AI is able to put into a drawing. Or creative writing
Yeah.
is another one where I don't have the skills of creative writing at all. But it definitely helps me, in that sense. Or, just to put that you know, charcoal sketch feeling over a drawing and kind of merge it with the technical side of it and an artistic feeling to it, merging those two together. So I think it has some wonderful potential when it comes to that. There's also, the repetitive tasks,
Yeah.
which I think, generating paperwork, that's great, a great design. Okay, now tell the people in the shop what has to get in the truck and when it has to get in there. And don't forget the truss bolts when you do that order. And those are the kind of simple things that someone's got to think about and take so much time. Well, maybe they come up with a list and an AI application will say, don't forget this. We just reviewed your whole list, and it looks for common revisions over the years of someone using their
Yeah.
inventory software of those things that were always added at the end of the order, at the last minute.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, those, we forgot the extra
Yeah. Oh,
safeties
by
for
the
the
way.
raincoats.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what were those things that, and it looks out for those and does checks against the inventory versus the count that is
Yeah.
being
That
requested.
makes sense.
So that kind of stuff I think would have a lot of potential. That's one of the things actually Vectorworks is getting very excited about, is helping generate inventory and keeping control of rental inventories through different shops
Yeah.
and comparing it to a drawing. What do you need? What do you have? And what do you
Well,
need? What
this
do you need to source?
I think is going to become one of the great opportunities, but also one of the problems, because I think because it's such a wild west sort of arms race right now in AI, you don't want to overcommit to doing it one way because there's going to be a better way. So like, you know, if you guys create, for example, a way to manage this rental gear sort of thing within Vectorworks, R2 is probably going to create a similar thing on the rental software side, and now you've got sort of a conflict of software products or whatever, right? So we're going to see some of that stuff. Like I'm already seeing where I'll commit because these companies with these AI apps, they come out with this annual program that's much cheaper than the monthly one. So I'll go, okay, instead of paying $12 a month, I'll pay $100 for a year. And then a month later, somebody comes out with one that's 10 times better, or it's easier, or one of that. And I'll give you a perfect real world example. So we have an app that takes our YouTube videos from the podcast and creates shorts from the videos. So you get these little 1 minute clips from the videos, and it does it using AI. We used to do it manually not that long ago, a few months ago. Now we use AI. Well, Riverside, that we're recording in right now, has it built in. So the app that I paid $120 for or whatever, I don't really need anymore because we can just
Yeah.
use Riverside now. So this is how fast everything's moving right now. It's just insane. Like we're going to have an AI bubble at some point because there's just so much money and time and energy being thrown into AI right now. But what are some of the things that Vectorworks does today in AI, using AI?
Well, basically, you can take any image, and whether it's generated from Vectorworks or not, you can place an image within Vectorworks. And then you can say, like I was mentioning before, I like to use white models where it's just the structure and the outline of the set, and let it do the generation of the texturing, the lighting, the room atmosphere, whether or not there's sconces on the exhibit hall wall, things like that you
Yeah.
wouldn't want to draw in individually. And it will take those images, and then based on the positive and negative prompts, will generate that. I actually would love to show you some examples, but I don't have them currently loaded up, so I don't want to have that embarrassing spot of searching through a hard drive.
Yeah.
But if anybody that is interested in this, you can easily reach out to myself, Jay Woodward at vectorworks.net, or just go onto our website or our university, and
Yeah.
there's some good promo materials. I don't want this to be a Vectorworks commercial,
Yeah.
but since the question was there, if anybody does want to go to look at that, there are some examples of what it does. But basically, you have the image and some prompts on the side of the dialog box, and the positive and negative prompts. So if you don't want to see Mardi Gras theme, or you don't want things like that, you can put it into a negative colors. You don't want things like that. And then obviously there's a lot more in the positive prompts. If you want to really drive something home, you put it in parentheses one or multiple times, and that's saying to really drive that point home. And then you have a slider that says creativity, and
Ah,
if you leave it at 0, well, it's going to look at that model, and it's not going to affect the model at all, and it's going to be pretty accurate to your prompts. And then if you bring the creativity up, it's going to start saying, okay, I don't have to stay within that. I can color a little bit outside of the
that's
lines,
cool.
so to speak. And then once you have that, you have a slider that will show you the original and kind of merge the two together to make some nice images. You can obviously save the images and share them. But the nice thing about it is that you can also take the picture out of the equation and just use the prompts and come up with some original ideas that let it, same thing with the creativity slider, let it start off the conversation. It's kind of like playing chess with yourself. Okay, and I like that idea. Now bring the thing that right now that once an image is there, you have the ability to create similar as well. So if you like what you got, you can stay in that theme and stay close to that, but have different variations of it.
Yeah.
And some great stuff. First round just came out in our last service pack, so it isn't something that it's available to everybody now. If you have our current version, just go on and get the service pack. and it works in conjunction with our cloud services, which is a great way for teams to collaborate. Again, I don't want to make this as a pitch, but a lot of people out there work on individual files and then give it to the production team. And then the poor production manager who doesn't know Vectorworks very well is trying to take all this information and combine it into one.
Yeah.
We have something called project sharing that lets the whole team work
Oh, that's cool.
together.
Yeah.
Everybody sees the updates,
Yeah.
but
For
again,
collaboration.
I want to make sure that this
Yeah,
doesn't
well,
go into us. Yeah,
I'll run sadly out of knowledge, anyways, because I've never done anything in Vectorworks.
yeah,
So, but
but if anybody has interest, just reach on out. I'm
yeah.
easy to find.
I was just really more curious just about how you guys are incorporating, because there's such a pushback from our industry right now related to the topic of AI, and I understand it. Believe me, I understand why people are afraid, because I do think it's going to shake some things up. I do think some people are either going to be out of work or not be able to charge as much, or it's going to change some things for some people. But I think good designers are probably going to become better and more sought after and more valuable to their clients with AI than they were without it. And so that's the good news. Now, if you were doing a very tedious task in the past that nobody else really wanted to do and it just got shuffled down to you, that task might be going away. Things like just writing lines of code or things like that. Like, Richard Cadena, I'm sure, right?
Oh, very well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Richard was on my podcast, I don't know, a month ago or something. And he said one of the first uses that he had for AI was he writes these JavaScript things. And he said it used to take him days, hours, and sometimes days to put these JavaScripts together. And and now he does it in a couple of minutes with AI. It's just that simple, right? So you get that part of your life back to do other things that are more valuable and more productive. And so I'm really excited about where it's going, and it'll be interesting to see where you guys go with it. Because I know, like, I even talked with Steve Warren about this last week from Avo, where when do consoles program themselves? They can. I mean, the technology's certainly out there that they could, and you could put in things like make it look like Beyonce from 2017. That look during whatever. I couldn't name a Beyonce song to save my life, but so some of that stuff I think is going to sneak its way in, but it's going to have to do it in a way that doesn't cause designers to use a different product because they're afraid of it.
Correct.
Pardon me, now I'm choking.
But there's always that one factor of the true gift of a designer is to go into a situation and project that idea to other people. And I don't think there's ever a point where you can just throw the laptop in front of Beyonce and say, "Here, hit the design cool show button."
Yeah, true.
That there's always going to be someone that has to sit there, and sometimes it's not a pleasant job.
Yeah,
to sit there with an artist that has limited time and maybe is a little tired from the last night's trip. And you've got to be able to have that personal interaction with the performer, with the production, the producer, whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
And to put that all together, and I think that's where there's always going to be that human
of course
portion involved. It's one of the most interesting shows I ever saw, and it baffled me because technically I'm trying to figure out how it was being done. It was the Beijing Olympics when they had the mahjong, I believe, the tile game. And the whole floor was covered with these cubes that went up and down.
I remember that, yeah.
And I'm looking at it and I'm trying to think, wow, what did Tate put underneath that floor? How is the hydraulics in such a small confined space? And there's a video wall underneath that. Where did they get the room for that hydraulics? And I'm trying to figure out how those 2,000 tiles were moving up and down.
Did you ever figure it out?
At the end of it, oh, I sure did. At the end of it, the top of them all flipped open, and 2,000 People came out and waved,
Somebody told me
and
that
it's like,
story
there it is.
before. I heard that one
Oh, it's
before on this
incredible.
podcast, and I
Yeah,
was like, "What?"
it's like,
Yeah,
got it,
yeah.
and that was it right there. And from what I understand, they rehearsed that for a long, long time with volunteers, and they rehearsed that for months on end out in a football state, local high school football kind of facility, and that was the only way to do it
That's
was
incredible.
just people power,
Yeah, someone else
and
told me
there's
that
something to be said
story.
to that.
Somebody who was involved with the show or something,
Yeah,
and I was shocked by that. That's incredible.
yeah,
Yeah, again, I mean, the lovely thing, the amazing thing about our industry is that it does keep moving forward. But one of the things you said earlier, where a flood came into the stadium, Gillette Stadium or whatever, and they lost the lighting rig except for the follow spots. you know, that's where you need a human, a bunch of
yeah.
humans. You know what I mean? Like
Oh
AI
yeah,
isn't going to know what to do in that situation. AI isn't going to flip the switch over to something else. AI
exactly.
isn't going to fix that problem. And because you have to monitor the what's going on in reality right now, you have to know the music, you have to know the crowd. I mean, and you got to make a decision on the fly with a production manager or a manager or somebody yelling in your ear saying, "What the
Yeah.
hell is going on?" And
Or a situation like, something of a program that I'm very fond of is the Event Safety Alliance, and how they really
mhm,
have really stepped up to keeping our industry safe,
yeah,
and how nobody can make that decision of canceling a show, and you've got 70,000 people in an event, and you've got some weather situations, and you've got the weather team, and the state police, all giving you information, and then you have that balance of, if we cancel the show now, we've got 70,000 people that could turn into a very
a riot.
unpleasant
Yeah.
situation, and it only takes a trained person that's gone through that to know how to handle that.
Well, and they made the wrong
And
call.
yeah,
Jim told that story on the podcast a
yeah,
few months ago, and that's a very similar story. I don't know if it's the same one, but the
no, no, mine's all
tornado.
fictitious. It's
Oh,
just that,
well, this was the
yeah,
tornado going through Indiana, and the festival organizers or whatever said, "Oh no, it's going to miss us. It's far away. The storm is going to miss us. Just give us another, half hour or something." And uh, and in came the tornado and blew through there and took the stage and killed some people. And um, so yeah, you're right. I mean, human intervention, human decision making, emotions, all of those things. I don't know that that's ever going to change. So I have to look at the positive side of all of this. I think there's other industries, other worlds where AI is going to be more problematic than ours, because ours is built on creativity and emotion and feeling and people and being live, being together, and all of that kind of stuff. So collaboration. Uh, Whereas when you think of things like weaponry, and wars, and we're going to have wars in the future where it's drones on both sides, controlled by AI, and that's scary because there's no human cost in a war other than who's getting killed on the ground. But it's weird. I was reading
I think
I was reading like a week ago or 2 weeks ago about a dog fight that was just won by an AI controlled plane, uh, which is pretty wild. I think it was drones. I think it was a dog fight between two
yeah.
drones. One was controlled by human and one was controlled by AI, and the AI one won.
One of our good teammates here moved on to a career that I think would be very, very rewarding. He was in our training department, and just a really, really nice guy, Don Ward, and a superb trainer, had moved on to a drone company that delivers medical organs
Oh,
by drones.
oh, that's cool.
And we think, well, entertainment's pretty cool. We make a lot of people happy. We make those spectacles, whatever. But there's also something to be said about getting a kidney across town, not getting stuck in traffic, and training the people that you know operate those. And I looked at that. And I said, boy, now that's actually making a difference in the
Oh,
world.
heck yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
but
big
a
one.
very interesting. Yeah, but to actually like use, that technology to save lives like that.
So cool. So
Yeah,
cool.
but
Well, I very much appreciate you coming on and doing this.
oh, it's fun. Yeah.
There's so much more to your life, I'm sure, and I'd love to sit here and talk for 3 hours, but
No, that was pretty much it. That was all 50 years, all wrapped up in an hour and a half.
damn.
But I had a lot of fun in the industry. I had a lot of learning to do. I made a lot of people angry over the years, and I apologize to each and every one of you.
Made some happy too.
Yeah, and it was one of those things you learned, and a good portion of the job was just getting along with people you were working with. And technology, you'll always figure that out,
Yeah.
but just how to walk away at the end of the day and saying, "Hey, I remember that person I worked with," and to see people go further. Definitely a shout out to everybody that put this together, and I appreciate you offering me a
Of
chance to come up
course.
here and
No.
tell some old stories.
Thank you for
And I
doing it.
hope I hope those are from the best of my recollection. Some of those are some blurry industry on part of it,
Yeah.
so hopefully my facts aren't too off
You know what I
base.
will say though, anybody who can last 50 years in this industry and stay working pretty much nonstop for the entire
Yeah,
50 years, that says a lot. That says that you've done some really great things along the way, and more good than bad, because it is an industry that'll kick you out when you screw up too badly, I think. So good on you. I mean, that's quite
yeah,
an accomplishment. Not too many people
I was
right now
blessed.
can say that I've been in the lighting business 50 years. So
Yeah, I was definitely blessed to have some great people take the time to teach me, and I encourage everybody that, turn around and see the future of the people that are struggling now, and try to help them.
hell
And
yeah.
the Jake Barry and Charlie Hernandez down at the Rockledge conference are doing just that. If
Yeah.
anybody's not aware of that, I just, hats off to those guys.
Yeah. That's a
They're
great
paying it
event.
forward, and they're just getting everybody that has this kind of knowledge. It's your turn. Step up. Help the people that helped you. And help the new people coming up. Make sure people don't get hurt.
Yeah.
If people don't know how to use fall protection correctly, and someone says, "Well, it's not my job to teach them," yeah, it is. It's our industries to turn around and make sure that we all stay intact, and we all try to help each other out.
Well, I
So
mean, it's true because an accident doesn't just hurt that one event, it hurts all
yeah,
events,
yeah.
and we've seen that, when things like a stage blowing over happens, now all of a sudden the government thinks they need to come in and run our industry because we're incapable.
Yes,
So if
correct.
you want to keep the government out of your stuff, just make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on and you are using great safety protocol and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, you're right. But yeah, again, thanks
All
and
right.
congratulations on 50 years in the industry. And yeah, I look forward to maybe bumping into you at a trade show or something going forward.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
See ya.